Revolution Radio. 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Say good afternoon to everyone and welcome to Whistleblower Nation, and I'm your host, Stella Free. This show is dedicated to all the courageous whistleblowers out there who step up to expose injustices when and where other relevant government agencies and social institutions fail to do so. And my main goal is to provide a platform for whistleblowers to share their disclosures and tell their stories. I also want to celebrate the heroism of unsung whistleblowers to help encourage more and more people to engage in this important civic duty. Because shining the light on wrongdoing, wherever it occurs, plays an important role in keeping society peaceful, free, and just. So today's whistleblower is Curtis Bennett. So Curtis, thank you so much for coming on.
Listen, thank you very much for having me. This topic and what we're going to talk about is very important for all reasons. And again, you know, we'll get into more of that.
Well, one thing I'd like to do is maybe just give a little bit of background and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your education, and how you got into being a whistleblower yourself.
Well, here's what's important for your listening audience, too, because it's important that they expand on this for what it means to them. Because I'm not a lobbyist. I work for the government. I am the government, not the politicians. We are codes and standards. We are not special interests. We are not political in any way, shape, or form. Now, here's what, for your audience there. My background is I'm an interprovincial journeyman electrician in Canada, which is I have national government credentials across the country, and then I've got separate credentials for the province. Now, the important part of this is this. I've had people say, because now, you know, electrical work is we can go to Revy or Rona or whatever's going on. Here's the reality of this. When I've had utilities say, you know, we don't agree with you, and I said, here's what the utilities need to understand. The Government of Canada and Industry Canada trained and certified one profession for the utilization of all electricity, and that is electricians. So electrical engineers don't do this work. We install to those standards. We build to those standards. We do that work. Electrical engineers cannot put on tools. Now, and I also want to say I'm a building construction engineering technologist, which is construction from contracts to completion. And now the reason we do that is specific to energy, global warming. Buildings are designed for their environmental load, how much energy they use, with all the challenges going on with weather issues. We're working on global warming issues, but we're doing it in an unrealized way because other parts of our work allow a sight of the temperature they're trying to look at. Now, a third credential for me is this. I'm a thermal radiation consultant for 38 years. Now, when we say thermal radiation, people need to understand this. When you've heard about non-thermal effects or thermal effects, when they talk about, say, Wi-Fi, or they talk about EMF exposure or non-thermal effects, there are no such things as non-thermal effects. We are temperature specialists of 38 years. Temperature for us starts at minus 496 degrees Fahrenheit. So as soon as you get above 496 degrees Fahrenheit, which is absolute zero, you get a little bit of electron excitation. You get natural vibrations. And those natural vibrations and frequencies produce that heat. So it's so important for people to understand this when they talk about non-thermal not being understood or thermal not being understood. It's because the applications exceed their expertise, and here's why. Over 38 years, we have consulted for oil, gas, lumber, military, fire departments, trained fire departments, 25 years ago to see through the smoke. It's just seeing temperature beyond your visible spectrum is so important because even as an engineering professional, we design for temperatures and we calculate for it. We could not see temperature until you got that red hot glowing element. Now, and why this is important even for the audience here, I never expected to get into working for medical education, working in clinical environments on difficult diagnosis, but over a long period of time, medicine said, you can see inflammation. I said, it's elevated temperature. And I said, are you blind? And the bottom line is, with injury or infection, there's inflammation, and guess what? They're blind to it. They can't see it. So when you go see your doctor, he's looking at you and going, I can't really see what the heck is going on, and we're trying to diagnose you. So all we did with this was give medicine sight of their objectives. Now, the reason I say that as well is, when I say we're the most advanced infrared in the world, without exception, it doesn't matter military, whatever, it doesn't matter who the heck you are with this. Imagine this, in the year 2000, we started targeting health and cancer issues, because I actually took it personally, because my father passed away, diabetes and leukemia, and I looked at that table full of pills, and I said, what is that fixing? And he said, nothing. They're treating my symptoms. And I said, you've got to be kidding. And then when my father started falling over, and you're getting to that end of your life, it was just horrifying, that helplessness that went with that. Because as electrical professionals, whether we're troubleshooting for industry, in big oil, big gas, all the above, we don't treat symptoms, and we don't leave something behind. So it took 6 years before of challenges of all particular kind, taking challenges from medicine across the globe on, we can see inflammation, we can show you this, and taking on challenges. I actually lectured in 7 countries. And I think our biggest audience was about 2,000, but I would give a global challenge to medicine across the board. Bring it on. And so in 2006, I was asked to do our first submission for a CME program. Now, if your audience looks up continuing medical education, you'll see that medical professionals across the board require ongoing education credits as a requirement for ongoing medical licensing. The same thing with lawyers. Law evolves, so lawyers need ongoing education credits. So in 2006, that's when it started for me, and this is why I am a professor. I am an adjunct professor and a chief science officer, a group of 14,000 licensed health and consulting professionals that put on accredited medical education programs applicable in North America. So when I talk about to everybody here, it doesn't matter what state you live in, my medical credential extends to them. We train those doctors specific to all the issues I'm talking about. And again, for your audience, then we'll just get into taking questions from you or anything else. I'm a very humble professional with all of this, and we don't want accolades for doing our jobs. Professionals are supposed to do your job. As a matter of fact, you have a duty to do your job.
That's right.
And so in leading our group, even to be cleared after 9/11 on an international technical issue, everybody missed, and it was about chemicals. And they said, we can't see the chemicals in the water. We can't see what's underneath the ground. I said, here's how you do this. So to get cleared to consult on that, to show them, here's this easy temperature application that just exceeded your expertise. So for people out there, and again, this is why this is so important, because part of this whistleblowing stuff is this: when we pass on to our government that education has evolved, medical education has changed, early detections of breast cancers can be seen. Early detections of any cancers can be seen. A brain injury can be seen. Concussions can be seen. And very humbling for me, because when I was cross-examined by utilities experts under oath, here are some of the questions they asked me to discredit me. They said, Curtis, are you a doctor? I said, no, but I lecture them for education credits they require for ongoing medical licensing. Curtis, do you consult in clinical environments? Yes. Curtis, are you a professional engineer? No, but we consult for all of them across the board. And it's just as simple as it is. My background is electrons, atoms, molecules, electrons, heat transfer at molecular levels. And so just these issues I'm talking about is this: when our government, even Canada, came to us and said, how did you see groundwater from the air? I said, you got a temperature differential. They said, we tried to see groundwater, which is considered nature's hidden treasure. And our job is to give that to biologists, to give that to hydrologists and forestry, so they can protect it and all the above. But to give them sight of that lets them represent salmon spawning, those important waterways that are just incredible. And again, we built those standards so we could do what we do. And when we lead in any capacity whatsoever, listen, we don't sell out. It doesn't matter who somebody is or what they are. We're here to represent the people that can't talk for themselves. Even yesterday, someone said, "You protected some animals," and I said, "My job is all life, protecting all life, sustainability." And so I want you to ask me some very tough questions here, because we're in a lot of trouble, both in the United States and Canada. And I mean a lot of trouble, and it really is an unprecedented emergency, of unprecedented across the board. And you don't hear people like me talking about that. But again, you can remember this. 25 years ago, when a municipality hired us and said, "We need you to work with this fire department at the operations level and show them how you can see through the smoke. We can put the fires out faster, better, see people through the smoke, see bodies, see whatever you need to do just to give them sight." We don't go in there and they say, "Well, we're glad you're here." We had to substantiate that first, and then train them, and then get into fire investigation. Same thing we did for industries, is isolating, electrical, mechanical, and other problems before they blow up. Now, here's why I say this. 6+ years ago, when I was listening to people talk, I heard people say in Ontario, they said, teachers and everybody, teachers, parents, and students are complaining about Wi-Fi. And I think it was 2009. I said, "What the heck is Wi-Fi?" And they said, "Oh, Curtis, that's wireless technology is put in schools so they can hook up to laptops." And I said, "You can't do that." I said, "Because that means you're going to have to put the classroom inside an electromagnetic field. That means
There's a little bit of a connection. I don't know what's going on with your phone. It's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see if we can back up here a little bit. Is that better?
Okay. So far, so good.
But,
yeah.
But this is what they said. I said, "You're going to put the children inside an electromagnetic field." And I said, "You can't do that. You can't put people in an electrical circuit. You can't put the teachers in that electrical circuit." And I even expanded on it, saying, if you put that technology in a school, you're going to cause high-speed vibrations and accelerate the corrosion of the building itself. You cannot use electromagnetic fields this way, because there are real reasons we wire the world. Now we found out we had to dig into the exposure code. And here's why this is so important to everybody. I lecture magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields in medical education. So we jumped into this, calling out our government, calling out industries, and to find out that they moved forward with this without the science to back it up. Now, it's important when I cross-examine the utilities experts for this. I cross-examined Exponent Inc. Now, they're the United States experts, and quite frankly, these disgusting and disgraceful humans have gone around the world technically overwhelming people with their garbage, but they're reliable because they're a publicly traded company. I cross-examined them where I got, Dr. Yakov Skolnikov, he's an electrical engineer. I said, "What is the specific absorption rate?" And that's what they use the test to see if this is hurting people. He said it's a dosage of electromagnetic radiation. That in itself is damning. And then I said, and then he went on and said that what I wanted to hear. Health Canada, the FCC, and IEEE, which is, your International Electronics and Electrical Engineers, so it's global. This is what they're using. Now, what people need to know is this. The specific absorption rate test is a plastic body part with water in it. Now, the reason that's important is because exposure codes, this is where the collusion gets bad, because all you do is you look up a code, because in building code, here's how it's simple for me. With building code, all buildings, all new and existing buildings must comply with building code. When we dug into the safety code 6, the same exposure code you're using, imagine this. The code says, we don't understand biological plausibility, and we don't understand causation. But when we find out, we'll amend the code. In the meantime, they said, this technology, now imagine this, these EMFs are not supposed to hit your body at all, because the code says this, unintentional stimulation of tissue can lead to nerve and muscle depolarization, which means it's triggering nerves, it's triggering your muscles. And then Professor Goldberg expanded on that, and I lecture with this incredible professional as well, and Dr. Lynch, where they said, Curtis, your nerves and muscles, they don't work independent of your hormonal and immune system. All three are compromised. So it's just horrible that they move forward, because guess what we did in September 14th in 2010 was report causation. Here's causation. We substantiated that for Health Canada as our authority having jurisdiction. And then October 28th, I provided expert witness for Canadian Parliament Standing Committee on Health specific to causation, and that was at their request. And when they contacted me, I said, can you make me testify? And they said, do we have to? And I said, absolutely not. But I did my job for them too. And then after October 28th, and this is again how powerful our group is, I contacted medical education. I said, we're in trouble. Here's what they've done. And they said, well, qualify it for a lecture. So here's the most important part. January 7th and 8th of 2011, causation and biological plausibility, and those mechanisms linking these radio frequencies to adverse health effects was lectured for continuing medical education credits required for ongoing medical licensing. Now, that was applicable to all health professionals, actually in North America. I didn't even understand that at the time. But I know this, because it was lectured at the University of Central Florida. Now, the only reason it's lectured there is because this is evolving medical education. It's just a course that's taught. But Florida continuing education brokers wanted it approved for all health disciplines in the state. So you can imagine this. We're training the doctors specific to these issues. And here's why. When you've got EMFs hitting your body, triggering nerves and affecting your nervous, hormonal, and immune systems at the same time, changing frequencies in your body, all the above, they've changed the scope of medical diagnosis across the board without telling medicine. They moved forward with this absolutely dangerous technology, which is effectively putting babies, pregnant women, men, everybody in buildings, ecosystems, inside a man-made microwave oven. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, when they say, oh, Curtis, we don't like you saying microwave oven, I said, those are microwave frequencies. You put them inside a man-made microwave oven, but you put them on a low power density, so you're just electrocuting them a little bit. Now, what should be alarming for people here, too, because I'm getting so angry with the people out there talking about and continually talking about this electrohypersensitivity. It doesn't exist. You know, the real correct electrical terminology is you're being electrocuted. There's no margin of error. Imagine this, Ella. When I looked at the purpose of the code, I said, what is the first sentence said? Someone said, the purpose of the code is to protect the public. And they said, uh-oh. And I said, what? And they said, the second part of it says, to specify or to specify the amount of induced in contact currents. That means they're inducing electrical currents into you. Now, where this gets even worse is when you induce currents, you're changing the voltages in their bodies. You're changing the voltages in their cells. And that's based on Ohm's law. Volts equals current times resistance. That peer-reviewed science is called electricity. And Ella, I've actually had to do submissions for the Canadian Nuclear. You imagine this: the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, because they mass installed smart meters in Ontario. I got called by people in Ontario, and they said they patched them through to me, and they said we don't understand what they're talking about. And here it is: the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission wants to give a 12-year license to a nuclear power plant. And they said it's in Toronto. And I said, what do you mean you got a nuclear power plant in Toronto? And they said it's right here. We've actually got those pills we're supposed to take in cases of failure. And I said, you cannot do that. You cannot give them a license. And I said, you cannot do that with that wireless and those smart meters installed in Ontario. I said, you will cause accelerated corrosion. You will have nuclear failure within our borders. And I have to tell you this, and that's when the political guys got into it, and they refused to accept my submission for this. And when they wrote back to me and said, we're not going to accept your submission, you forgot to put the name of the power plant. You forgot to put a couple of things in there, and I just wrote back to them. I said, the name of the power plant is Darlington. It's in the subject line. And I said, and I'm going to remind you, as administrators and politicians, you'd better do your jobs or you're going to be liable. There's no wiggle room with this. I said the code rule across Canada related to this is 4.1.3.6, and it's called vibration. And here's why. And you imagine this, Ella, this is happening to your bodies, this is happening to your brains, this is happening to your buildings. Because when they said, I said, what are the frequencies of the antennas and the smart meters in Ontario? They said 900 megahertz. That's 900 million cycles per second. And that means those electromagnetic fields will penetrate the exterior of that power plant. And anything they interact with, the concrete and everything else, will vibrate 1.8 billion times per measurable second,
Wow.
86,400 times a day. So you imagine this, and then to top it off, look it up. There's 440 power plants. You guys have them in every state. And as a matter of fact, in several, some of them have several nuclear power plants. 900 million cycles per second. And that means those electromagnetic...
Well, there's a little bit of background in there. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. But you can imagine this. This is the reason you cannot do this. It compromises building code, which means, imagine for your homes. Your homes will no longer be compliant with building code. That means they'll revert back to the bank. Your investment's gone. All that's gone. Plus, on top of that, they're hurting you. Then there's a liability of hurting you. And, Ella, I want to say this, too. We didn't do this just to be nice. We did this to warn them specific to the liability. You cannot do that to people. You cannot do that to buildings. You cannot blast this across watersheds. You can't blast this. It will kill trees. This will kill everything on the planet because everything in the world is electrical. Atoms and molecules, which is electrons. And with these EMFs like this, because, hey, this wireless sure seems innovative, instead of there are real reasons we wire the world, and we don't want one spark at a refinery so it blows up the refinery. We actually wire, imagine with a gas plant or an oil field, we actually wire that so that if there is a spark and is an explosion, it's contained to the equipment inside the motor, inside, so it doesn't get anywhere out there to blow up the place. And horrible thing with people is, Ella, I'm being called around the world, and I'm talking about doctors, nurses, professionals across the board being asked, Curtis, they're going to take my children away from me because they think I'm crazy. Curtis, and people screaming and crying and dying. I'm not kidding you when they say, Curtis, the health effects are horrible.
Yeah, we know. People are finally starting to understand that, too. They are really starting to realize the evidence and the science is starting to prove that this is unhealthy technology for the human body and mind.
It's not just unhealthy, and here's the thing I did yesterday, and I want to say this, too, because next Wednesday, and this is important, too, next Wednesday I'll be interviewed in Memphis, Tennessee by a retired registered nurse and an interviewer, Donna Bohannon. Now, the reason Dawn is interviewing me is this. You are Professor Bennett. You lectured this for CME credits, which means it's no longer a debate. And you can imagine this and clarifying this. They said, here's one person who said, Curtis, I'm targeted. I said, unfortunately, you're not as targeted as you think. They're blanketing entire cities, blanketing entire areas. But they said, this broke my bones. And they said, do you believe me? And I said, yes. And even lately, concussions, can this break your skull? Can this break your bones? This is an electromotive force going through your body, going through your bones, going through your blood, going through your organs, going through all of it. And now imagine this as well. And this is, again, we did this with utilities and this corruption and this ignorance and this collusion and this negligence is just so disgusting because when I cross-examined the experts again for Exponent Inc., I went after the electrical engineer and I said, what happens when you mix two frequencies? He said, you get 4 resultant frequencies. Now, the important part of that is this. There's a utility, they were installing smart meters here, and they actually sent a radio frequency engineer to deal with me. He was there because they said, that guy's going to be there. You've got to technically shut him down. And so as soon as he got there, I just technically beat him up in a minute because I said, what's the frequency of that one antenna? He said 900 megahertz. I said, that's 900 million cycles a second. He said, that's correct. I said, what happens when that interacts with 8.3 cycles per second or 8.3 hertz? He said, oh, you're going to have all kinds of harmonics, which is electrical disturbances. I said, did you know the 8.3 hertz is the brain? Now imagine this too, and this shocks me because I'm not a medical professional. You look at delta waves. Delta waves, when you look at them, imagine this, 0.2 hertz, 0.2 cycles per second while you're healing, sleeping, and doing all this, and 0.2 cycles per second interacting with 900 million cycles per second, or 2.45 billion cycles per second with Wi-Fi. You're going to be hurt. It's changing the frequencies in your brain. It's even actually giving excuse for criminal behavior because people are incoherent. Dr. Goldberg said it is horrific. He said you're going to create this psychopathic behavior because people. Imagine this: you're on a different frequency. You're not on the same radio station. Yeah, and this is why you can't do this. And Ella, I just want to say this, and then I want to ask you, then you can just go with this. When I cross-examined Fortis BC's expert, Mark Warren, and I want to name these guys because, listen, he's a professional engineer, he's liable, and I'm looking forward to dealing with him because we've been given the legal avenue to reverse 2 smart meter programs, which is going to happen right away. He said, we take exception to you saying we're going to hurt people. He said, you can be 10 centimeters away from the meter, and you're safe. So this is your smart meter on the outside of your building. I said, he said 10 centimeters, which is a few inches. I said, are you going to cover 17,000 square kilometers, which is 6,564 square miles, with these highly penetrating electromagnetic fields to communicate with your meters? Yes. So imagine this. They're building a microwave oven over several cities, the forest, the trees, and all the above. So you're going to have accelerated corrosion of infrastructure, schools, bridges, dams, everything across the board, your fire separations. Buildings will be illegal. And here's another reason why it really is an emergency. Imagine this in Florida. When we dealt with Florida, they said we have mass installed 5.6 or 5.8 million meters. I said that means you've got 5.8 million buildings that are no longer compliant with code, with building code, and that means you're going to lose that tax base, and that means you're going to lose all of those revenues, all those services, schools, police, military. Everything.
Curtis, let me just interrupt for a second. I just want to interrupt just for a second so we don't run out of time. There are a couple things I would like to get. We have like an hour and a half left, and there's a couple of things.
I'm done giving you that background. I want you to just be tough with me and ask me some horrible questions.
Okay. I also have like a guest host with me. His name is Dr. Aaron. You might have heard him on some of my other podcasts I have. But EMF and the radiation and the effects and the smart grid and the smart meters and then also what we can do about some of these, like we can contact.
Is he an MD?
He's a PhD. Are you there, Matthew?
Okay. Well,
Matthew, hold on one second.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Hi, Curtis. How are you? This is Matthew Aaron.
Now, Matthew, listen, thank you so much for being here because, like I say, you can imagine this changing the scope of medical diagnosis when medicine is so challenged as it is. They have such a limited time in diagnosing people. And here's the bottom line. When I finished our work on these EMFs, I said wireless exposure has to be considered in every diagnosis, all consultations from now on. You cannot ignore it.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I wish
and again, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wish that once the biomedical research community really gets on board with this, one thing that I would like to see is the development of biomarkers of exposure to harmful EMF that could be used in investigation and litigation purposes.
What you're talking about is so important, but you think about this. When doctors said, Curtis, how come people in the same room, some are hurt and some aren't? And I said, the code says this. And again, electrically, I want to say this. Here's an example. When they talk about single power lines, they're very dangerous. There are reasons we put wires together in a bundle because the electromagnetic fields cancel each other out. When you've got single power lines, the utilities aren't happy with this, but they're very dangerous. And here's an example. We had a lineman. He was working on a dead power line running parallel to a live one, and they were 7 stories away from each other. The live line was under so much load, they made a mistake on the dead line. The live line electromagnetically induced that dead line and killed him immediately. If that wire had been perpendicular to the other one, he wouldn't have felt it. The reason I say that is this. Just your orientation to the electromagnetic field can make the difference. The size of your body, you can imagine this with your background. Doctor said, wouldn't hydration make a difference? Lifestyle, toxicity, all those factors in your body. And again, the idea that these are hitting you from head to toe, and you think about this, and again, this horror story of this. Like they say, every aspect of your body is electrical, your electrical systems. Every cell is electrical. And imagine this even with when they said they're going to change when you induce these electromagnetic fields like this. Here's a biology professor that Dr. Joan Moffat, and this is at a publicly moderated forum, and she said this, and it just shocked me. She said it is common biological knowledge that a 0.2 millionths, 0.2 microvolt increase in cellular voltages changes white blood cells. There's your immune system. 0.2 millionths of 1 volt. 0.4 changes mood. And
Absolutely.
So these guys are doing this, and now they're layering on more technology, more of this wireless. They want to get the truck drivers to. They want to have this grid so truck drivers can do their logins wirelessly instead of understanding this. You're putting people under more electrical load, more aggressive oscillations, bigger electrical currents. And here's the thing: this will kill people without exception. This will kill everything, and I want you to think about this with the things you're talking about, because I've said this to doctors. You got a baby in a womb that's developing, and I've said to them, what's going to happen to a child whose nervous, hormonal, and immune systems are compromised at the same time? Frequencies in there, while they're developing, are compromised. The voltages are compromised. And then I've actually had calls from military people that have said, Curtis, my grandchildren are mutated. And you think about this horrific story where teachers called me and said, Curtis, my child died from a birth defect, and I worked in a Wi-Fi classroom. Anura Lawson in California, bless her for her work on those things when she went forward and went public with not wanting this in her classroom because the children were getting nosebleeds. We have to protect our children for all reasons in the world. And again, I got to tell you this. These guys said, you're picking on us. And I said, no. I said, we do what we've done for 38 years. The same way things would blow up before. You do this, you've got a liability you will not be insured for, and then you're going to be criminally liable for putting babies in a microwave, putting children in a microwave. Imagine this. Imagine this for what we're talking about here is they've used a plastic body part with water in it to bypass you as a PhD. A plastic body part to bypass engineering, medicine, environmental law, everything. This is what's so dirty about these. And again, this is what happens when the FCC, listen, these guys don't have enough money to buy themselves out of what they've done because they're going to be liable. Lloyd's of London has already said this years ago. We are not insuring EMF issues as it pertains to health or property. And then here's the other thing, too. People in California, people that are hurt, listen, everybody literally has a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. When you think about those children in a classroom, it just makes me so fucking mad. I said, you're radiating them and interfering with their capabilities of learning while you're grading them on their intelligence. It is just horrific. And I said, aren't those children going to have a lawsuit? Their parents are going to have a lawsuit. And what's putting a baby in a microwave worth in a lawsuit? And it's horrible. Doing this to policemen, doing this to firemen. And I want people to know this. There is nobody exempt from this. And then we can get into this and talk about this more. And then there's the installation of the smart meters. being an electrical professional, here's the horrible part too, and we warn the utility. You have no authority or jurisdiction to cross that property line and touch that meter base. That meter base belongs to the homeowner, not you. You have the right to read that meter. You have to work with the homeowner and their electrician to remove it. There's actually a connection. You know, have you seen an overhead service before where you've got a pipe going up the wall and the loop of wire going across your yard?
Yes.
There's a connect. Imagine this. At the top of that meter, at the top of that mast where that loop starts, you can see that. The connection is where jurisdiction changes. The utility works one side of that connection. We take over from there. They don't go into our jurisdiction, and we don't go into theirs. So imagine this. These guys here, here's an example. They mass installed those meters here, and because they couldn't get electricians to do it, the utilities hired these people and called them certified technician professionals or some stupid name, and they trained them for 2 weeks, and these guys are running on properties and pulling meters under load. They're just swapping these meters. And here, when I asked this young man that came in this property here, I said, where's your credential? He said, I don't have one. I said, get the hell out of here. And then I said, what are you doing? I said, how much do they pay you to swap a meter? He said, $5.
Wow.
Electricians do not sneak up on properties and pull this, and here's the reason why. 38 years ago, too, we would work for, listen, you name them, Syncrude, Suncor, Esso, it doesn't matter who they are, lumber mills, mines, their insurers, all the above. And the biggest thing is this. We would isolate electrical connections because they are the biggest cause of electrical failure. So we would isolate those electrical connection problems prior to exploding, report them. Their professionals would fix them. Insurers actually would. We actually got so good that they would schedule shutdowns on this. Insurers would say you have to use that technology. So imagine this: people in Memphis, 10 people in Memphis were killed in a fire. And when Dawn and I were talking about this, she said, "Curtis, could the meter have done?" I said, you got to remember this: it's the installation that's illegal. So imagine this. I said, how old was the building? They said decades old. I said, so imagine these very fragile connections. And then these guys go on the property. They did not even say to them, hey, by the way, we're going to swap this and pull this thing and disconnect your power. And here, imagine this. You're pulling the meter under load, which is going to produce arcs and surges, compromising equipment inside the building, compromising electronics that is blown up, compromising the electrical systems. Then they put another meter on under load, more arcs and surges, and then they're just left like that. Now, when I went after the utility, I said, you guys, what are you doing with those connections in there? They said, oh, Curtis, we can't touch those connections. That's the electrician's job. I said, so you didn't do anything with them? No. They closed the meter back up. We can't go in there again as electrical professionals. Now, you've heard of smart meter fires. Here's the worst part, too. And again, we warn them specific to the liability. They put these meters on there. They did what they did. They are causing these fires and even collusion between fire departments. Pardon me, not fire departments. I'm going to say this. The president of the BC Fire Chiefs Association or whatever. And these guys saying, no, everything's safe for all reasons in the world. It's not safe. 10 people in Memphis died. They had bars on their windows when things started burning. Imagine 10 family members killed in one fire. And the next day, the utility removes evidence.
Wow!
You can't do that.
Yeah. Ellen,
and you're not going to be insured. It's horrible. And here's another thing too: you can't sell your building. You can't sell your building and say, "Oh, by the way, I left out that this might start a fire. If your air conditioner comes on and that big load sparks across there, we're going to burn you down." My goodness.
And maybe we can also get into.
I just want to say this.
Curtis, maybe we can also get it.
Go ahead. I just want to say this. The idea that they did this without verifying the integrity of these meters, they bypassed all regulatory process to mass install this garbage. And it will not save 1 watt of energy.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a couple of things. I know we have some questions, so the topic kind of has shifted a little bit, but I already know the answer, but maybe you can give a reason to the listeners. Do you own a microwave? Okay. And if you don't, why, and then also maybe we can talk about, we know that this issue of Wi-Fi is, basically everyone on this planet is a victim of it at this point, or pretty close to it. And then also some of this, technology is also being weaponized intentionally, by the government. That's another topic, and then maybe going into a little bit about what's going on in Cuba. And then, of course, I do want to get into what we as citizens, concerned citizens, of humanity, what we can do, what steps to protect ourselves, what action we should take to kind of get this under some kind of control. And I know education is a big part of it.
Listen, absolutely. So ask me which question. Ask me a question first, because everyone is a different answer, and you know what? And we can give you and that's fine, because we can actually give you what you need to get this stopped. Because this is what we're doing with other jurisdictions, is telling people, going to your building inspection department and talking to them. Because imagine this: they bypassed the municipal authority. They bypassed the whole. They bypassed building code. They bypassed everything and mass installed this without thinking, you can't do that. Here's the code rule related to vibration. They put the city in those positions of liability. Now, here's why this is important, too. I went down to our city hall here, to the building inspection department, with people that said, would you come down to city hall and represent this? I went down there, and as soon as I said to the supervisor of the building inspection department, I said, they're using a plastic head with water in it to bypass your jurisdiction. He said, they can't do that. He said, they told us this was safe. I said, they told you it was safe, and they have absolutely zero science. They got all the maybe people who wanted to sell their credentials or whatever. Horrible. And guess what? That's going to bring municipalities into this across the board. Imagine for medical professionals. Now, I got a call out of Virginia by a doctor that had attended lectures of ours, and they said, I'm a pediatrician. We're with a group that represents 24,000 children. Do they all have attention deficit disorder? Do they all have autism? What the heck is going on?
The percentage is high. It's definitely when you look back.
Imagine this. Yep.
When you look,
medical professionals have errors and omissions insurance, or pardon me, they have malpractice insurance. Horrible.
Yeah. When you look back, like even 30 years ago, though, the increase in ADHD and the lack of attention, I can't say, as a matter of fact, what all the different components are, but it's definitely on the rise.
No, Ellie, you're right. I'm glad you said that, because we were sent a declassified military document by the Army Intelligence, and that document was the end of 2006, December 13th, 2006, and it was absolutely shocking, because the military talked about this technology that's been around for decades, and they're trying to figure out how to use it, including on people, crowd control. Without it being a laser, just a little bit of electricity, to make them jump around because we think they're heating up a little bit. And then here's the worst part. They actually say research doesn't know what's going on, and we can't explain the mechanisms of interaction or the mechanisms of action. And for us, for me, it was very simple, because they said, Curtis, the mechanism of interaction is what? I said, they're highly penetrating electromagnetic fields. So they're going through you, they're going through the building, they're going through everything. There's your mechanism of interaction. They said the mechanism of action is, I said, they're hitting atoms and molecules of different things, people, biological systems of any particular kind, buildings. And so there is that mechanism of action. And it's really sad that, because all the military, and this again makes me sad, because what they did is they even admitted, listen, we radiated a monkey, put him in the microwave or whatever they did, put him in there, and he started to act out when he was 107 degrees Fahrenheit internally. Just despicable that they would use this technology like this and move forward with it. Donald Trump doesn't know. And again, with the construction industry, I want to say this. We do not have situations where somebody said, Curtis, I'm a politician. I'd say, well, listen, I'm happy for you, but I've nothing to talk to you about. We do not have a code to accommodate any particular political party or special interest. So Donald Trump doesn't know his own developments are being radiated. with that liability to himself, his corporation. You can't radiate people in your hotels. You can't do this. Imagine this triggering heart attacks. And just to keep this in mind and expand on this, when someone, an electrician asked me, he said, Curtis, I've got a pacemaker and I'm told to stay 2 feet away from an electromagnetic field. And if I run a power saw, that's dirty electricity at the end of that extension cord, so that'll trigger his pacemaker. So imagine this. Fortis, BC, Captain Jerry Flynn, a retired guy, his science isn't perfect on this, but he got Fortis, BC to admit what's the range of the one antenna for the wireless network in the smart meters. That's that, what do they call it, the LAN part of that? Imagine they admitted 2 to 3 kilometers, which is 1.8 miles, with an omnidirectional antenna, which means you're radiating everything for connectivity. You've undermined, imagine with a PhD. I've actually contacted universities and said, when are you changing when are you changing all your engineering programs? I said, your degrees are no longer applicable. You can't induce electrical currents into anything and everything and change voltages and frequencies. You've changed the scope of all sciences across the board. It's just horrific, and again, really boils into a national security issue. And Ella, I just want to touch on this briefly for all reasons in the world. It's a horrible thing if you read what's happening in Cuba. Here's the United States, the FBI, the CIA, U.S. intelligence agencies, Army intelligence, and all above. Collectively, they go down to Cuba, and imagine this. They get so technically overwhelmed, they call this a sonic weapon. That Cuba has somehow put together this thing that has just overwhelmed the world, and it's a sonic sound weapon, which is garbage, because you'd have destruction of the buildings. You'd have physical destruction of buildings. And they said, here's this mysterious illness and they mentioned concussions. The harm that we're talking about, their admissions of the biological effects that happen for real. Now, how the U.S. responded? They just expelled 15 diplomats from Cuba and said, we don't know why, they're blaming Cuba because they're being cooperative instead of Cuba had nothing to do with this. We probably exported this technology to there because guess what? They got Wi-Fi in their hotels. They got Wi-Fi in the embassy, and people are being hit by this and hit by this horrible technology that is not supposed to hit people in according to the exposure codes. So we're dealing with that now with our Prime Minister because I contacted him in their office and said, listen, the idea that you had U.S. diplomats hurt, Canadian diplomats hurt, to blame Cuba and to do this, now here's the U.S. admitting to the harm. And so here's a kind of a cruel joke on my part. I said, are you guys going to expel Donald Trump from the United States for microwaving people and doing the same damn thing to Americans?
I think
you cannot do this.
A lot of people in the TI community think that the calling it sonic weapons is a smokescreen because it's a lot less, or I should say, it's a lot more acceptable to think about sonic weapons than to think about microwave weapons.
Well, and again, imagine this: when you don't invite the right professionals to that party to talk about this, that's how they came up with that. Even it's actually embarrassing that they came up with a sonic weapon, and that's all they could come up with, which is even MIT said, no, you couldn't do that. You'd have to do something so big. You couldn't do this. In poor little Cuba, they've got enough problems going on without being blamed for assaulting diplomats and doing those types of things. So, like I said, we have to jump into this, and we will be jumping into this for all reasons in the world. But listen, and here's the thing is, it's not legally definable as sustainable according to the Auditor General's Act or anything else. Listen, there's going to be forensic audits. There's no margin of error. And I want to say this with targeted individuals, and this is so important. I've actually dealt with targeted individuals that said, we don't want to talk about smart meters. We don't want to talk about smart meters because we're being targeted instead of understanding this. When Fortis, BC says one antenna is going to reach 1.8 miles, that means everybody in a 3.6 diameter of 3.6 diameter is going to be hit by this. 3.6 miles. That means everybody is hit to some degree, and everybody's going to be impacted. And the point is, that's the infrastructure they can target you without implanting anything in your body. You're hit by these EMFs, which, make no mistake about this, they are an electromotive force. They are a force. Imagine somebody punching you at that cellular level and just literally going all the way through your body. You can't do this. It's just such a crime against humanity. Listen. I am not an alarmist, but imagine me representing this. You're going to kill all trees. You're going to kill all crops. Your crops aren't going to be there. You're going to lose that economy from the crops. Then what are you going to do? And this is a national security issue, even in the United States, and it's an international security issue for everybody in every country, because this assault has to stop. And again, every targeted individual, everybody else, you're going to have multi-million-dollar lawsuits for real, and these guys don't have insurance. And then I have actually been called out of Oklahoma where they said, Curtis, this killed people. We have the death penalty. And I said, what do you want me to tell you? What do you want me to tell you? It is what it is. You can't put people in a microwave oven. You will be put to death if that's the case.
Yeah. Agreed. It's just really scary what's going on, and this is invisible. It's like what you can't see can kill you.
Absolutely, and this is again for electrical professionals. And people said, "Boy, you're really aggressive with this." And I said, "I am I am one of the government's trained and certified energy professionals specific to this. We are the experts. You cannot do this in any way, shape, or form." Imagine this even in Canada. You've undermined Canadian electrical code. So you've undermined electrical code across the board, which means, and the utility says, and the FCC says, no. We can do whatever we want because there's something written in 1996 or whatever, which is garbage. Neither the FCC, the utilities, or anybody can supersede building codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes, medical, across the board. You can't undermine insurers. You can't do all of that and say, hey, we've got the right to kill people for ease of communication. The driverless cars they want to install, listen, the cars might be around. The biological units that are supposed to be in them will be dead.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine this. We are not electrically compatible even a little bit. And why it's so alarming to me as well is when the biologist said, Curtis, 0.2 millionths of a volt. And I said, the electrical systems we work in and work with are so rugged, we wouldn't even consider that. But that just goes to show you how absolutely vulnerable the body is. And it just, like I said again, to put a baby in a microwave oven, to put a mom and with that baby in there, and and with doctors, imagine a horrible thing for me when I dealt with doctors. I said they're in a microwave oven on low. I said if they had vocal cords, I said you would hear them screaming. Golly. And then again, this will kill military. This will kill the military. This will kill the CIA. This will kill everybody. Listen, these guys aren't going to have jobs. None of them will, because there's going to be no tax base. They're not going to work on a volunteer part of this. So it's just a horrible thing that's been created because of greed and stupidity. And this technology, like you said, it's been around for decades, but they move forward. You've heard of Barry Trower?
Of
yes.
course. Yeah, he was actually going to be. I was going to do an interview with him at one point, so we're planning on doing that again. I'm looking very forward to it.
No, it's important with this, and here I just want to say this why. They said, Curtis, why are they ignoring Barry Trower? I said, Barry's not an electrical professional. He's not explaining the mechanisms. That causal evidence has to be provided to courts. I said, but the fact that they ignore a man with his background and a professional with his background that applied this in the military, that just goes to show you how really stupid the process has been. So when you interview Barry, imagine this when he's talking to you. Causal evidence has been found and reported, and we're substantiating Barry. And I want to say this too, and again, we say this as a warning. Listen, some of our associates are getting calls by lawyers saying, "You guys have provided causal evidence." That's what's been missing. And they said yes. And guess what? Lawyers are calling saying this is what we need to take this to court. This is what we need to take care of this. And imagine this for me when they said, would you testify in your capacity? And I said, of course. And I said, I'd even do it just because I want to, because one, I want to see a judge or a jury's face when they show a plastic head with water in it and say, here's the science they're using, Your Honor. And Your Honor, do you know? And listen, if you have a plastic head, you're safe. And again, they based everything on thermal effects. And are we cooking the meat?
We got a break right here, so everybody will be back with Professor Curtis Bennett after these messages.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, welcome back. We're here with Professor Curtis Bennett, and we're talking about the dangers of EMF and Wi-Fi and just what's going on in this world and what we can do to kind of get this under control. So, Curtis, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. And also, we just wanted to mention, though, that, this is such a wonderful station, Revolution Radio here, and we do need, this is a self-sufficient station, so we definitely could use some donations. I can maybe get a little more details and let you know where we're at, but so near the end of the show, I'll give you that information and some links to get on. $5 even helps, guys. Just $5 makes a big difference, so anything you can do to keep this station going would be very much appreciated. So anyways, I'm going back to you, Curtis.
Yeah, if you want to ask any questions related to this, and this is really important, either with your audience or otherwise, because, listen, there's no wiggle room. This has to be stopped. And again, the damage is measurable by the second, 24 hours a day. And originally, exposure was based on 6 minutes for a 200-pound man.
Hi, Curtis. This is Matthew. I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Okay. No, absolutely.
So I'd like to take this back and get a little bit of perspective, both for me and for the listeners. So, from what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, you work for the Canadian government, and your job is to do inspections on related to EMF exposure. Is that about right?
No. When I say that we are the government, we are the government, meaning, the Canadian government the Canadian government Industry Canada trained and certified one profession for the utilization of all electricity.
Okay.
And that's electricians. And that just means my credentials are across the country. Under no circumstances do we sell out. We do not work for the Canadian government unless they retain us to do some work for them, the political part of this. But then again, for all those different industries that are out there, it doesn't matter where they're from or otherwise, we would troubleshoot those electrical systems and with their insurers and everything, just to isolate problems before they blew up.
Okay.
And just save a lot of money and save lives and stop fires. Okay,
thanks for that clarification. So it seems like you're well connected with growing interest in Canada and maybe in British Columbia in particular in the dangers of Wi-Fi. And is that a fair statement? You're well connected with that growing issue.
No, actually, here's a sad state of affairs with all of that.
Okay.
when a government allows this to move forward, and again, our government has got a duty to do something. Now, I want to say this too, because I've said to I said to governments or even utilities, I said, how much do you guys pay for the official opposition to the direction of your company? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, call Bill Gates and ask him how much he spends, what his budget is for the official opposition to the direction of Microsoft. They said, that's ridiculous. I said, that would be correct. That's why we do not have political parties running the government. We do not have special interests running a government. They've got their own agendas. It doesn't belong there. If they want to administrate this and behind the scenes call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, that's fine. But what happened is that, here's an example. In 2003, there was an interface fire with Kelowna, BC, and in the Okanagan. It just raged through here. And there was a lightning strike. Well, right away they're reporting, we can't see. We're having trouble. The terrain's too rough. I contacted media because our team was working here on climate change, and I said, and we called and we said, listen, do you want us to track the direction of that fire through the smoke for you? And they said, they just laughed and thought we were smoking something instead of, we had trained fire departments so long ago. Well, imagine this, governments, our premier, Gordon Campbell. Now this is just the reality of what Gordon did. And he's just going to have to own this, and this creepy. I don't even want to. What I'd tell that guy is, you know what? You're just in a lot of trouble because August 21st of 2003, during this interface fire, we were told to stay out of the way. Curtis, we got jurisdictional problems. The government's handling this. They're doing all those things. My job is bigger than ourselves, so we were literally out and looking at through towards our city, while citizens groups were just out there waiting for an evacuation order. Here was this hell on earth coming through the smoke that we could see. To literally jump in front of a police car, and he jumps out of his cruiser and to say, you've got to get him out of here. It's here. That initiated the evacuation of 15,000 people in 2 hours. The next day, there's a photo op, or the premier's on the beach doing some media, and we're actually imaging this fire as it grows and it spreads. We're imaging it from miles away, and the houses and the buildings are starting to burn. Well, Premier Campbell and his entourage were there. And here's the bottom line. Premier Campbell, whether he likes it or not, they edited the public fire inquiry, so none of this information was represented. Now, here's a horrible thing now. You've heard about forest fires raging now, even in British Columbia. Imagine this. They're fighting them blind. They're fighting them blind because of this edited public fire inquiry. So these dirty guys have got together on this. Now, here's why I say this, too. There's citizens groups in BC that are selling filters, selling products. So these guys have actually said, listen, we're not passing on Curtis's information. We don't like him. When I was a registered intervener in a utilities application, Fortis, BC, I was there to substantiate causation and biological plausibility in those legal applications. The Citizens for Safe Technology, their lawyer, David Aaron, left when I was cross-examining the experts. And he said, because I heard about you, we don't like you, stay away from us, whatever. And so David didn't see causation or even hear it. So at the end of the program, all the health professionals stepped up, the carpenters and everybody else. Well, they were dismissed because the plastic head people prevailed. Here again, Dr. Havis. Now, if you've heard of her, Dr. Havis has to own something because I don't call her Dr. Havis.
Yeah.
She's a biology professor. Very simple, that you're inducing currents and changing biological voltages. Dr. Havis got into promoting filters, saying that, if you put these filters in the wall, that somehow that was stabilizing people electrically, but they left out the antennas. That's what causation is. Oh, you left out the antennas, and those distances are radiating people. You've got different people selling products, which, there are no products, there's no safety, there's no Faraday cages. And so here's that sad part. Causation was found and reported 6 years ago. And it's gone on these extra years, and we had to spend millions of dollars fighting citizens to help them. Even, I imagine this, I had Bachelor of Art people call me up and they say, we don't believe in your credentials. And I said, well, listen, if I need to draw a picture, I'll contact you. A Bachelor of Arts is not going to talk to me about anything. But again, here was this process. And here's another thing, too, even in California. And listen, people are going to have to step up. Josh DeSalle, Take Back Your Power, beautiful work. For him to report Curtis is like a mad dog, he's out of control, instead of, you better believe I'm out of control. Everybody's being hurt. You can't have that building biologist teach the Cubans how to live within your microwave oven, live with your brain concussions and doing those things and sell courses. It's ridiculous. I say this for this reason, too. In California, I would get people with political interest or otherwise say, Curtis, can you give us information related to this? Sure. Here's the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission document. You're going to talk about nuclear failure within your borders. What did they do? Curtis, we didn't want to talk about that really alarming stuff. We wanted to soften it up a little bit. And it's just horrible because you can't do that. When we go to a fire at 2 o'clock in the morning, people don't say, listen, this is really inconvenient. We're sorry your building's on fire. We're sorry we bothered you. It doesn't work like that. So in California, imagine this. The Senate is talking about smart meters when, guess what? These guys should be pulling the trigger on causation. Has been found, reported. It's illegal. Here's what you're going to do with this. They didn't do that. In Massachusetts, the same thing in there. They're doing the same darn things in there where they're saying, listen, Curtis is a little bit too brutal, so we'll just try to soften that up a little bit for people. And you can't soften this crap up. You can't. If your child's in a microwave, do you want me just not to call you about it because, you're going to find it inconvenient? So that part of it is very frustrating for me because people have died, even when they called me and screamed for their lives years ago, and it just, that haunts me. It haunts me, the people, to even hear them when we're not supposed to do this. I apologize to people the same way I'd apologize to you because we were supposed to do our job in protecting people, and that didn't happen.
Well, I'd like to make a distinction or offer as a possibility a distinction. And I'm very grateful for you working so hard to bring attention to these issues. And the way I think the targeted individual community might see this is that there's really two issues. One is the dangers of EMF where the industries that are using that are not actually targeting specific individuals and willfully exposing them in the sense of a criminal assault. And that's one big important issue. And then targeted individuals allege, and they often have fairly good evidence of it, that there's actually people that are criminally assaulting them with things like high-powered microwave generators, that they're literally aiming at their apartment. And I know it's hard to substantiate that, but it seems like the former issue is the one where you are working more diligently, and I wonder if any people that are involved in the former issue, that is the dangers of smart meters and whatnot, to what extent do they realize that there are these thousands of people alleging that there's actually like criminal targeting, almost like by gangs of criminals or organized crime groups going on that are using basically directed energy weapons? Is there overlap between those two issues as you see it?
Well, here's what's important with what you just said. We've actually worked on targeted individuals, targeted military contractors. Uh-huh. And so here's an example. They contacted us. Now, listen, when they say that, they can't tell if there's something implanted in us, can they see it? Of course you can see it. Listen, when you see the work that we do, physiology, differences in your eye temperature can be seen. When these EMFs hit you, it's going to cause excitation. There's going to be heat as a result of that. It's very simple, actually. But here, like I said, you can see it, and it's quite simple to do that. But you have a hard time working with some of these people, and here's why. When this military contractor contacted us, he said, I'm being targeted. And he said, do you believe me? And I said, no, my job's not to believe you. He said, well, we need to find out. Can we do that? And I said, 100%. He said, can you isolate it to where it's coming from? I said, of course you can. Every antenna has a direction. It doesn't matter whether it's a dish, what you're talking about, or doing those things. And guess what? I didn't expect to find a military piece of equipment with 9 gigahertz in this antenna, literally pointed at his building, hitting him, hitting his family, hitting his building, and causing unrealized damages. And then he had a special software program where we actually used different products to just try to deflect it and just move it around to validate it was there. It was horrific. I mean, imagine this, 9 gigahertz, which means this. When he would actually call me, I could hear him vibrating. Curtis, I gotta go. We gotta run. And those electromagnetic fields are expanding and collapsing inside his wife, his family, his building, 18 billion times per measurable second. Imagine that, oscillating 18 billion times per measurable second. Now here's where it gets bad, because we got called by a really high-profile targeted individual, and so high-profile that they said, listen, I want to retain you guys at any cost. It doesn't matter what it is. You have to help us do this. And I said, what do you want us to do? And they said, I need you to qualify how medical teams are breaking into my building at night and doing surgeries on me while I sleep. And I said,
okay.
Are you listening to yourself? I said, are you listening to yourself? And they said, Curtis, they're breaking into my building and working on me while I sleep, and they're doing surgeries. And they said, I can feel it. There's structures under my skin. I can feel it moving. And I said, what you feel moving is this electromotive force from those electromagnetic fields hitting you. I said, there is no medical teams breaking into your building and doing surgeries on you. And I said, what you feel is this invisible electromagnetic field slamming through your head, slamming through your eyes, making you go blind for a little bit, hearing all the above. And that perception of targeting is there because who would have thought these guys would take this ridiculous military technology and then say, hey, let's use that for ease of communication around the world without understanding what it really means and killing the planet. So I would just say with people, listen, it can be isolated very easily, quite frankly. And again, these guys, we warn them specific to this because they will go to jail. You cannot do this in any circumstances. And I'd even say this to you. When I was doing a program, there was a military guy in there, 30 years in the military, and I just said to him, what would happen if somebody pointed this at you in a military application? You know what would happen. They would be killed. You know, that's it. You can't do that. You can't point this at people. You can't do this. It is just a crime beyond anything that is known. And again, the idea that even police have been told, hey, we might be able to use this for crowd control because if we spray people with it and do this, they heat up and get agitated instead of, oh no, you're electromagnetically inducing their atoms and molecules, changing frequencies, doing all this horrific thing, and you're going to have an unrealized liability, including you're going to hurt the police officers too.
Well,
these guys might think this is good, but you can't do it.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That tells me that you're basically working across both of those camps, basically.
All of it. All of it.
Yeah. So I would like to add as a follow-up about the isolating the signal. Of course, if criminals are doing it with intent in a bona fide targeting manner, there is a certain cat and mouse aspect to it where if they know that someone is coming over to investigate, they can turn off the signal, and then there is no really residual forensic evidence. So it's very hard to isolate if without continuous signals.
I would disagree with you, and
really?
And here's why.
Okay.
Absolutely, you can imagine this, and just think about this again, because what they talk about with non-thermal, when you think of atoms and molecules with electrons, if you take a magnetic field or an electromagnetic field and put that close, you're going to cause excitation, which is going to produce heat. So you imagine this: if somebody's pointing a device at somebody or doing things. Here's an example with Dr. Havis. Dr. Havis said to me, Curtis, we want you to do an experiment with us. And I said, what is that? And she said, we want to radiate 2 classrooms, one without children in it, and one with children in it with Wi-Fi, and one without. And I said, we cannot and will not participate in anything that's radiating children. And I said, and secondly, I said, you're going to lose your thermal signature of the children because your computers are going to heat up. Your computers are going to be hot in the background, and then on top of that, I said, you're going to heat the walls with this excitation. You're going to heat the drywall. You're going to heat this stuff. And we look over such low temperature spans, or you can, that, listen, we've tracked people by their footprints through the snow. The heat from their footprints. It's an amazing technology. So
thanks.
They can be caught.
Thanks for that info. I would really like you to check out some evidence that I posted on Ella Free's YouTube channel, because it's about a 20-minute video, and the title of it is Evidence of Microwave Assaults. And I was in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, and a harassment network that was basically in part of 1190 Hornby Street, that there was this escalating harassment, and then there was, on one occasion, I saw them pointing what looked like some kind of beam weapon type generator at my apartment. And then it was moved, well, I can't say for sure it was the same device, but a similar device, that device disappeared, and then it seemed to be relocated to 1177 Hornby Street, still pointed at my apartment. And when it was fired at me, it actually did change the glass in my apartment window, and I got some really good recordings of what I think is the cross section of the beam, which had features that looked like basically a signature or a shadow from the waveguide on the firing end of that weapon. So if you get a chance, since you have expertise, I would really like you to take a look at that video. It's on Ella's channel. And if you don't mind, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I just have one more question. Oh, and by the way, you mentioned that it heats up the eyes, for example. And as a result, as a result of that assault, when I was looking at the weapon, I call it a weapon. It was probably a high-power microwave generator. The same concentric circle pattern that was essentially burned into my glass was also, for 24 hours, burned into my visual field, like a welder's flash, kind of. It lasted for 24 hours. And that's what gave me the 100% confidence to know that what left the mark on the window was also what injured me. Fortunately, I recovered. But I think there's another person with a question. So I just have one more question for you, and that is, what do you think about this idea for people who are targeted with radio frequency weapons and devices? I was thinking about wanting to get like a data logger, like what linemen wear when they're exposed to high power EMF. And there's some, they cost a few $1,000s, but they have really wide bandwidths, and they can do data logging basically continuously. Would that, if you were able to correlate that with either a log of notes or, I guess, allegations of injuries or photographs of injuries or something else like that, would that serve as evidence that would be taken seriously?
Always. And I want to tell you this, too. I'm not making light of you for a second, because you imagine with what the things you've said to me here when you talk about this, and so you're right about this part of it. I've actually seen this where they've said, Curtis, the police want to use a Wi-Fi device to see if somebody's on the other side of the wall.
Yep.
And when you think about that, you imagine this. You're firing an electromagnetic field through that wall, and imagine a room with nothing in it except let's say there's only 2 or 3 people in there. So you can imagine this. As soon as you come across those 3 people, you're going to have that different density, and that different density is going to show up there, and I guess if they get it refined enough, you'd see the shape of the human being on the other side of that wall, so they could target them without going across there. And again, yes, they might think that's an innovative technology. You cannot do that under any circumstances. And again, when I say targeted individuals, here's something I just dealt with last week, where we've tried to help, this a school teacher so much, but when these people don't know where it's coming from and they're just hurt because of the blanket coverage, here's an example. They said they're trying to take my stock tips. They followed me to Hong Kong. They followed me to other parts of the world. I said, you got into a plane with Wi-Fi. And they said, then when I was walking through a park, there was a couple that walked by me, and I know that they did something. Then they went to their Honda dealership and said, listen, you guys have got people here, you're targeting me. There's devices under my car. There's this. And here's that perception because they're being hurt. Well, of course, the car dealership went through her car so many times and did this so many times that finally I get a call from her in a hospital. And she said, Curtis, they've certified me. And I said, unfortunately, I said, that's a safer place for you to be right now, because it's not that she's not being hurt. Those representations are not what needs to be represented. You know, the Honda dealerships have not gotten together to put devices on people's vehicles.
Right.
But when you've got this blanket coverage interfering with those brains, so listen, there's more that needs to be done, and we need to talk more about this, because one, you know, here's something in diagnosis. You know, people need to be helped, and this has to be stopped. So we're going to be talking more, because the bottom line is, one, we want to stop this, stop the EMF assault across the board, and then we're going to isolate these issues you're talking about. And listen, go after these criminals. And I want people to know this too. I am not the only person in the world. I'm doing this because I'm talking about it. You can imagine this. Millions and millions and millions of professionals are stepping up. You've undermined everything. You've undermined my own credentials. So we have to talk more about this for real. And again, I want to apologize to you, because under no circumstances, this is when we got involved in this. You know, I contacted our governments and everything else. I said, what the hell did you do? And finally to find out, horrible. It's horrible for you.
Curtis, you don't owe me an apology. I appreciate your efforts. I am very grateful that you're speaking out, and you know, I'm fighting in my own way with you. And I'll just say, you know, thank you so much for sharing your information. And because you work in British Columbia, I really would like you to check out that video of that evidence, just so you're aware of it. It's on Ella Free's channel. I think I'll ask Ella to email you the link, and please feel free to share that video. I stake my integrity and my reputation behind that evidence. But anyway, thanks again. I'll turn it back to Ella, because I think there's some more questions for you.
Okay, I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Curtis. Yeah, you know, Matthew and I respect you immensely, and I, you know, just appreciate the opportunity to interview again. With that said, I have another gentleman on the line here, and he has some questions for you. His name is Olive. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you for taking my call, Ellis. I appreciate that very much. Curtis, I have a question for you, and you know, we're talking about EMF, and you know about HARP and all the different ways they could use this technology. 1 second. And my question to you is that everybody listening to you now, most of the people use a nuke oven or a microwave oven to nuke their food. After I had read a article in Russia, the Russian scientists told the government to ban microwave ovens because of what it does to the food. Not only that, it depletes vitamins and minerals from the food. So if you could just touch on that a little bit, because most of the people here will really recognize that as a problem they should stop doing.
You know something, you're so right with this, because here's the bottom line. I don't use a microwave. I don't use a microwave because it's an unnatural way to heat something. And here's the other thing as well. You know, Dr. Lynch is just, you know, and here when you talk about these horrible things, imagine this. Dr. Lynch is our medical lead. He's an incredible physician, doesn't use pharmaceuticals, doesn't do a bunch of stuff like this, works on the early detection of breast cancer, toxicity, radio frequency issues, including, you know, using radio frequencies to isolate a cancer. Like here are issues we discussed. Can we take a radio frequency and isolate a cancer and then kill that cancer with a directed frequency like that? The answer is yes. Beautiful if you could do that and just kill a cancer like this. And Dr. Lynch is an example. Imagine this. He wrote 4 prescriptions for OxyContin in Florida. They sentenced him to 25 years. and he's a medical doctor, so they've got him locked to this. But here's what he said as well. They would actually bring products into the United States, and one, I don't know what this guy was, a quantum physicist or whatever the heck he was, he said, Curtis, this guy would actually take this product, he would have something shipped to him in the United States, whether it was food or a product of any particular kind. He would do tests on it and say, you x-rayed this and you radiated it, and I'm sending it back, I want my money back. And he said, what do you think these high-speed oscillations are doing? I said, give me an example. He said, do you know that they're radiating bins of fruits and vegetables that they're bringing over from different countries? You know, you want to know the terrorism issue, the immigrant issue, the hiding issue. And so imagine this, they're x-raying them, the fruits and everything else. And you're absolutely right. You know, when you're talking about an x-ray, you're talking about ionizing radiation. You are changing the structure of your food. Your body might not even recognize it. It is really a bigger problem. And again, now they've got induction ovens. What you've seen about these, where you just put the pot on there and there's no element, you're using a microwave frequency to cook that food, and it is very unnatural. You need a normal heat, put it on a stove, do it that way. Microwaves, even when I turned mine on and we did tests, I mean, one, you can pick it up from outside the building, and then when I saw doctors doing tests on people being hit by microwaves, we lined everybody up in a row. You can line up 5 people in a row and see the attenuation or the elimination of these electromagnetic fields going across the building. It's incredibly dangerous technology. There's reasons why the Earth has a magnetic field and not an electromagnetic field. We generate our own electromagnetics. This will kill the planet.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard of Dr. Linus Pauling, who's a great scientist who, this gets to what you're talking about, who, because of his 11,000 scientists who signed this petition on banning the nuclear testing, they were doing it in 4 ways. Now they could only do it underground, but because of his petition and what it did to mutation rate of children in the future, babies, we talk about nuclear bombs. So when we talk about food in the microwave oven, don't we say we're nuking the food and that it does take out the vitamins and minerals? I want to make that clear because some people don't get that it's actually taken out.
100%, it's taking out. Listen. And that's what I mean. I've even said to doctors, I said, so you're changing the structure and the properties of that food with that ionizing radiation. I said, would your body recognize it? And what does your body do with it? And you're absolutely right. People need to understand this. Seems like it's nice to heat up that cup of water that way and do those types of things. But here's I think his name is Dr. John Orr in Massachusetts or whatever, Worcester Polytech University. He's on a radio show, and he says this. They're actually asking him. He's an electrical engineer, an incredible background, and they said, Dr. Orr, are microwaves dangerous? And he said, if you're inside the oven or if it's leaking. Well, guess what? It's leaking and you're inside the oven. So you're absolutely right on all those things. And people need to be aware of this convenience of these technologies. You know what? It was never proven. Imagine this, they bypassed all processes and just mass produce and mass installed this for their corporate agendas, for political agendas, greed and stupidity getting together, where we would take years to amend a building code or for a new one to evolve, or an electrical code. This collusion and this bad stuff. But here's the one thing. It's going to implode on itself because of what they've done. They've undermined themselves. When people said, Curtis, the rich and elite, I said, imagine the rich and elite getting all their buildings back where they're no longer compliant with building code, which means you're not going to be able to sell them, you're not going to be able to rent them, you're not going to be able to occupy them, so you're going to be bankrupt. And these people with all the money, they've undermined themselves. And even when someone said, Curtis, they've got structures where they can hide and do those things, I said, what these guys have done with this, imagine this. They're microwaving the atmosphere because that's your wired system. That's your wireless wires doing this. So they're contributing to these hurricanes, contributing to this weather. And hell is coming for what we've done, because Again, I'll tell you this. They're worried about global warming. Listen, it's very real. They just couldn't see the cause of it before, and we did work that was absolutely shocking related to this. So, it has to be stopped. I know that, the big satellites and everybody beaming this stuff down, but guess what? We're killing this beautiful planet and everybody on it without exception. And listen, there's going to reach a point where, people are not going to be able to reproduce. They've got those challenges as it is, but we're changing humans. We're changing all. You got to wonder who the heck would even allow this to happen. You're changing the scope of all sciences. So that's an important question on the microwave part of it, and our X-raying things that are coming into the countries, which is they have to do that now for security, and unfortunately, it's hurting things.
And I would say that it's mind parasites in the brains of the leaders of the world. You have these what's called archon parasitical entities. But back to the radiation. Dr. Linus Pauling said he took 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day. He won 2 Nobel unshared prizes. He won an unshared Nobel Prize for chemistry in 1954 for his on what was it, crystals and I'm trying to remember what it was, complex molecules and things of that nature. Really powerful, intelligent stuff. I think he's the greatest scientist ever in the United States of America. And he took the 10,000 milligrams, he said, because of pollution in the water and the air, ecological disasters, and radiation, like you're talking about. I did the 10,000 milligrams for 21 days, and it sharpens you up. There's a guy on our radio show who he says he takes 12,000 milligrams every day, and he comes on at the AM. Trying to think of his name, Ahmad. But anyway, that's what he says, and he knows about Linus Pauling. So it looks like that if you take liquid minerals, because it's in things of that nature, it'll help fight off these inhumane radiations and nuclear ovens and things of that nature. What do you think?
Well, here's the thing is, having a stronger body is important, and nutrition's important, the delivery system's important. But here's the bottom line at the end of the day, is that this will trigger your nerves, trigger muscles, and imagine your nervous, hormonal, and immune system's compromised at the same time. Like I said, this will kill people no matter what you're taking. And again, the idea that now you can see them, we want truck drivers to have this across the nation so they can log on. We want everybody else to have this, so, driverless cars. Google and these guys want to have a Google home. So listen, blanket radiation, the more the merrier, without understanding, listen, the bottom line is at the end of the day, this will kill everything on the planet without exception. And literally destroy everything, because I on our blog I wrote that here's somebody in New York bought a painting for $270 million, and I don't think they just wrote a check. They probably borrowed money on it. And I said, are you going to put your Picasso in an MRI chamber? I said, because that's the only thing that's going to protect it from radio frequencies. I said, it will vibrate and shake that painting until you're just going to end up with dust.
Yeah, I know. That's interesting about the radiation. I feel that what you've been talking about is that I have been targeted. If I have taken aluminum foil and put it on my head, and the aluminum foil has gotten hot. I've even had people touch it and they go, what the heck? So that's very interesting there. What do you think about Faraday cages, and things of that?
You got to be careful with this, because Faraday's cages, here's an example. Listen, they're made with great intent. Here's an example at a radar site. At a radar site, now I actually in a radio show, I had a radar technician come on. He said, Curtis, I want to dispute what you say, that he said that these frequencies hurt people. And he said, I work on the dew line sites and the radar and doing those types of things. And I said, it's not me that says it hurts people. I said, it's the code that says it hurts people. I said, you can't do that. And then imagine this. He said, but I am having seizures. And then on top of that, here's what they do at those radar stations. Imagine this: they actually have a Faraday's cage. They've got copper mesh in those buildings, and it's grounded. So when they induce an electrical charge into that building system, it's got a path to ground. Otherwise, you could literally be electrocuted if you went up and touched that building and you grounded it out. So, that's the idea of the Faraday's cage, is to give it a path to ground. But and here I say this because it just breaks my heart. It just makes me crazy that people are building a Faraday's cage in their home to protect themselves from this. And they said, "Curtis, is this going to work?" And I said, "Are you going to go outside?" I said, "Are you going to have people drive by and throw burgers through your Faraday's cage?" I said, "Your building code covers this. Your municipality doesn't know it's been done to you, but the idea that people are hiding in these Faraday cages and looking for these solutions, and again, retired RN Donna Bohannon sends me an article yesterday. What did they say? 170 million Americans are hurt. 170 million Americans are sick." And again, there's no happy ending to the story. We're not electrically compatible with those electromagnetic fields.
Wow, and that's why I'm thinking a lot of people gaining weight is because they microwave the food and then it doesn't nourish them. They have no vitamins and minerals, so they got to eat more, or they're eating or drinking sodas and things of that nature. Anyway,
You're changing the whole system. So look at keep an eye on Ella's program. We're going to be sharing more information, because what you guys are doing is important. And again, for people out there, it's a sad thing where, imagine this, where I've had doctors say they want to incarcerate me or lock me up someplace because of examples of what you're saying, instead of to write something to the courts for them that what they're talking about is real. And here's how that's happening. Here's that causal evidence. But it just breaks my heart. You're not supposed to have people hurt like this. You're not supposed to do this. Here's the bottom line. Microsoft isn't going to do good business killing all your customers.
Right.
And so you guys have got the laws in your hand. And these politicians, here's the bottom line. Man, politicians, I don't have a politician anywhere working for me, nor would I have one. Politicians, even when someone said a politician wants to talk to you, and I said, I've got nothing to say or nothing I want to say. Except, you want to be a politician, do your job. You have to do your job first no matter what. But you guys TIs have got lots of lawyers. You got lots of very smart people. Now imagine this. Here's one of our associates. Spent an hour on the phone with a lawyer, and after that hour they said, Can we retain you? And they said, why? And they said, you said those magic words, causal evidence. Ken Mack, now this guy's out of Tennessee. Now again, poor Ken, he's a dairy farmer. And again, I give Ken credit for this. As a dairy farmer, listen, he's a hard-working man. He's his family has put his life in the line for all these things. Ken said, Curtis, I'm going to hire these lawyers to represent our EMF case. And I said, Ken, don't hire lawyers because they have to learn about EMFs first. I said, you have to do this properly. And here's a sad reality. And this just happened. Ken spent over $200,000. And at the end of the day, his lawyers said, listen, your case is going to be dismissed because you are not producing causal evidence. And I could never get it past him where Ken said, hey, isn't that what one of your guys is doing, is causal evidence with this? I said, Ken, I told you to go there first for all reasons in the world. Now here again, and this isn't picking on Dr. Sam Milham because I respect his work and doing those things, but here's the thing with Ken too. He brought Dave Stetzer in there with a filter guy, and Dr. Sam Milham, $50,000 to do their study on this place, and guess what? When it came back, it was just useless garbage. Sam didn't know that if Sam would have known this has been lectured for CME credits, that means it's a done deal. And he should have just represented that, but nobody told him. And Stetzer, with respect to intent, guess what? Plugging filters in the wall has got good intention. Capacitors do good things. Even his own filters aren't designed for those arcs, and surges are doing those types of things. And so it just didn't work.
Hey, wow, thank you for everything you're doing. I love your passion. You got a really good passion about what you do. You have a good heart. I could tell you're a good man by the way you're talking, and you care for people. And that is really great. I thank you for that, Curtis, and Matthew, thank you too. Uh, Ella, thank you for taking my call. You guys have a beautiful day and be well and rest well.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ola.
There's lots happening for you. Help is coming for real, and we're talking really soon.
Well, what can we do as individuals? Like for me, I want to go to city council. I want to have a discussion about Wi-Fi in the schools, ask them to hardline them, and present a lot of evidence showing the damages and how it affects, especially the kiddos, because they have more water in their body than us as adults. And so that's something I'm going to do on my level. What about other people? What can they do? We know that they can go they can get their smart meters swapped out. That's something they can do. And so go ahead and answer the questions to your liking.
Ella, something that I would do because of your leadership is this. Now, again, because I was a registered intervener, we were provided legal avenues by the British Columbia Utilities Commission to reverse 2 smart meter programs for real. And again, you have to do that properly. You have to do it technically. And but listen, there's no wiggle room with these guys because, listen, the plastic head is garbage science. That thing should be an aquarium. But here's why I say this to you. Now we're getting ready to release documents that people as a whole will be able to take to their municipality to help explain this. So when you go to City Hall, here's the important part. People would go and take the bioinitiative report. They'd take all this stuff where listen, that in itself, all the reporting on harm is horrific, but they're looking for causation evidence. And here's what you do is we would provide you this documentation, and you just throw us under the bus. We're not here to be nice to people doing those things. We're here to represent everybody and that law. And this has got no applicable. Imagine this. The specific absorption rate isn't anywhere in building code. It's not even mentioned because we would not shake the crap out of buildings with electromagnetic fields. And I can tell you this, I've actually had masters in architecture call me and say, the concrete of the structure was dust. And I said, you're shaking it 1.8 billion times per second. What would happen if we take a piece of drywall and shake it 1.8 billion times a second? So, Ella, I would pass those on to you because it's really going to be kind of a generic document, that anybody can use and take it forward. And you can just represent it. Your municipalities will jump in. Your medical professionals will jump in. As soon as here's an example with Donna Bohannon. As soon as she went to cardiologist, and here was a cardiologist that she worked with as a professional, and she went to them, and as soon as she said this, the EMFs have been lectured for CME credits. The cardiologist's face changed immediately because it means this is now medical education. It's not a debate. Those doctors aren't going to be able to explain this, but it means that it is medical education now. So this will allow your doctors to jump on board and really help you, get their lawyers, get their insurers involved, because now imagine that that pediatrician. What kind of malpractice insurance do you have for 24,000 children as your patients? And you're going to be sued. You make no mistake about it. And I don't know if you've seen this, Al. You think about this. Have you seen what Boeing engineers used to determine Wi-Fi was safe in airplanes?
I'm sorry.
You know what they used?
Nope. What do they use?
You know what Boeing engineers used to determine the safety of Wi-Fi in airplanes? They made 2 sacks of potatoes. One's bigger and one's smaller. 2 potatoes. Sacks of potatoes.
Wow.
They actually, it is so laughable, they actually show the potatoes sitting in a seat. And here's a big sack and here's a little sack. And here's the other thing as well. Pilots have been told not to talk. But when we've been called by pilots, I've had pilots call me and say, 1 in 4 people getting off the plane looks like a tomato. And I said, you're referring to color. They said, they're red. And then on top of that, they said, we're hurt. We're not supposed to talk about it. Imagine this, you're interfering with those pilots and you're radiating them while they're doing this. And again, with respect to Boeing engineers, how do you leave out all the bioelectrical information associated with a human being and put a darn potato in there? It's disgraceful. It's just disgraceful. And imagine the liability to airlines. Imagine a liability. I said, listen, oh, that's great. Now you got a plane, and guess what? You got a flying man-made microwave oven with everybody in it.
Well, it's sort of
including the pilots.
It's sort of, that's how TIs feel with this issue, that the government is sort of treating us like potatoes and plastic heads filled with water. It's not very respectful. And I think you alluded to this before, but if this problem doesn't get under control, it will it turns the rule of law on its head, first of all, and it will be very destabilizing to society. You know, people can't function with this going on. So I agree.
No, all things. And again, you guys have got what you need to stop this for real. And the peer-reviewed science is called, electricity, sciences, engineering. It's so basic. Medical education, biology for real. And again, here's the sad part, that this is why, this collusion is just going to implode upon itself, because when you weaken a professional gene pool like this, where Boeing engineers are overwhelmed by a potato, that's despicable. And again, engineers, and I don't give them any wiggle room on this, because they, like me or anybody else, if I was missing information, I would go to other professionals and say, what do you think about this? And let's work together. Sciences complement each other. So you guys have what you need, because it just wasn't being explained. And that's why I apologize too. In our area here, imagine this. The RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, actually told citizens that went in to file complaints about smart meters, they told them they wouldn't even take them in the police station. They said, get out. And because they were told it was safe, instead of the reality, their own families are being radiated, their own buildings are burning. It doesn't matter who you work for or what you do. People need to understand this. They've got to step up, because you're changing everything, including criminal. Imagine for real giving excuse for criminal behavior. Where somebody goes to court, hey, you burned down a building, you killed 100 people, you did what you did, but then a doctor says the same thing, that, you know what, you weren't criminally responsible. And here's what I'm going to use for an example. In Calgary, Alberta, a law student, he's in his fourth year, whatever, they're graduating. His father is a 30-plus year member of the Calgary Police Department. He's a bright boy, wants to get into law enforcement. He shows up at his graduation party in a little outfit because he believes that they're vampires. And he stabs 5 students to death at the graduation party. Now imagine this for real. It went to court, and I heard the prosecutors were crying, the judge was crying, the defense was crying, the people in the gallery were crying, because he was found not guilty because he wasn't mentally stable, for real. And I'll tell you what, that's a tough pill to swallow for any parent, to give excuse for that. But the bottom line is, he was mentally unstable, and here you got a young man. You think it was his wireless? Yes. And again, all you got to do is prove these EMFs are hitting them. This is just across the board catastrophic. And again, listen, Donald Trump, you can imagine this with him. He doesn't know his own developments aren't designed properly anymore to accommodate this. And Donald Trump, listen, personally, I personally, it's got nothing to do with it, but, I don't particularly like anybody when it comes to those issues and the way they're handling those things. And that, but guess what? People have said to me, they said, would you and Donald Trump get along? I said, Donald's in the construction and development business, and guess what I do professionally? We're in the construction and development business. What he would do is get his engineers and say, technically beat the heck out of him, and then Donald's in, because he doesn't want his family hurt. He doesn't want his son hurt. He doesn't want his buildings. And again, in New York, I can only imagine what's going on in there, because I got a call from one editor from a paper, and he said I can pick up 73 Wi-Fi networks from my building. And here you are, though, destroying buildings in New York, causing that accelerated corrosion of that. And so across the board, Ellie, you guys are going to have what you want to stop this. And like I say, when we're going to provide documentation to you, this is specific to causation. I personally and professionally never overstep my boundaries. It's so important for science professionals to step up and expand on this, administrative or any other professionals to expand on this for what it is, and with causation there, people can get some help and we can stop this assault because, listen, this stuff just doesn't belong there, but it's there because it's cheaper. And I just want to say this, and when people said, Curtis, they're radiating those children in the schools, they're doing it purposely, and I said, unfortunately, no, the dummies aren't. I said, if they contacted us and said, how much to hardwire 30 computer stations? Well, guess what? You're talking about a few dollars to do that, but you could still do it. Each station would be hardwired, safe and wonderful, faster than anything. And so I put in a bid. If I put in a bid and say, okay, we'll do that for $50,000 and put in 30 stations, and that's just that. And then somebody else comes in and says, I'll do it for $3,000. And they'll say, well, what are you going to do? I'm going to put a router in the middle of that room, and we're going to radiate. Well, they won't say radiate. I'm going to put in a wireless router that will communicate with all those wireless laptops for $3,000. Schools are going, heck, let's take the cheaper one instead of understanding that. And again, I want to say for schools and for teachers, it's shameful that this is happening in schools and somehow the science teachers and those professionals within those institutions aren't understanding. These are electromagnetic fields, guys. You guys teach that physics. You teach that. What the heck is going on?
Exactly. Such a good, valid point. Well, it's coming up to the final hour here, and so let's just go ahead and we can wrap it up a little bit. I want everyone to maybe go take a look at your website. You want to give any information right now is probably a good time because I really want people to educate themselves on these matters.
Yeah, and here again, you're not going to see things on our website. You're not going to see things where, hey, look, we can sell you this and do this type of stuff. What you do is you go to www.thermoguy.com, THERMOGUY.com. If you go to news and updates, you'll be able to see here's Wi-Fi in schools, here's all these issues, all the documents I'm talking about, including links to those transcripts, to government stuff and what you need. And it's important. It's hell, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, and please donate everybody to www.freedomslips.com/support.atm. Just a little bit goes a long way to keep this station up and running. Thank you guys so much. I look forward to seeing you guys next Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Thanks a lot for all your efforts.
Hey, no, listen, sorry.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Put the fires out faster, better. See people and see people through the smoke. See bodies. See whatever you need to do just to give them sight. We don't go in there and they say, "Well, we're glad you're here." We had to substantiate that first, and then train them, and then get into fire investigation. Same thing we did for industries is isolating, electrical, mechanical, and other problems before they blow up. Now, here's why I say this. 6+ years ago, when I was listening to people talk, I heard people say in Ontario, they said teachers and everybody, teachers, parents, and students are complaining about Wi-Fi. And I think it was 2009. I said, "What the heck is Wi-Fi?" And they said, "Oh, Curtis, that's wireless technologies put in schools so they can hook up to laptops." And I said, "You can't do that." I said, because that means you're going to have to put the classroom inside an electromagnetic field. That means
there's a little bit of a connection. I don't know what's going on with your phone. It's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see if we can back up here a little bit. Is that better?
Okay. So far, so good.
But this is what they said. I said, you're going to put the children inside an electromagnetic field. And I said, you can't do that. You can't put people in an electrical circuit. You can't put the teachers in that electrical circuit. And I even expanded on it, saying, if you put that technology in a school, you're going to cause high-speed vibrations and accelerate the corrosion of the building itself. You cannot use electromagnetic fields this way because there are real reasons we wire the world. Now we found out we had to dig into the exposure code. And here's why this is so important to everybody. I lecture magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields in medical education. So we jumped into this, calling out our government, calling out industries, and to find out that they moved forward with this without the science to back it up. Now, it's important when I cross-examine the utilities experts for this. I cross-examined Exponent Inc. Now, they're the United States experts, and quite frankly, these disgusting and despicable humans have gone around the world technically overwhelming people with their garbage, but they're liable because they're a publicly traded company. I cross-examined them where I got, Dr. Yakov Skolnikov, he's an electrical engineer. I said, what is the specific absorption rate? And that's what they use, the test, to see if this is hurting people. He said it's a dosage of electromagnetic radiation. That in itself...
Revolution Radio! 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Say good afternoon to everyone and welcome to Whistleblower Nation, and I'm your host, Stella Free. This show is dedicated to all the courageous whistleblowers out there who step up to expose injustices when and where other relevant government agencies and social institutions fail to do so. And my main goal is to provide a platform for whistleblowers to share their disclosures and tell their stories. I also want to celebrate the heroism of unsung whistleblowers to help encourage more and more people to engage in this important civic duty. Because shining the light on wrongdoing wherever it occurs plays an important role in keeping society peaceful, free, and just. So today's whistleblower is Curtis Bennett. So Curtis, thank you so much for coming on.
Listen, thank you very much for having me. This topic and what we're going to talk about is very important for all reasons. And again, we'll get into more of that.
Well, one thing I'd like to do is maybe just give a little bit of background and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your education, and how you got into being a whistleblower yourself.
Well, here's what's important for your listening audience, too, because it's important that they expand on this for what it means to them. Because I'm not a lobbyist. I work for the government. I am the government, not the politicians. We are codes and standards. We are not special interests. We are not political in any way, shape, or form. Now, here's what, for your audience there. My background is I'm an interprovincial journeyman electrician in Canada, which is I have national government credentials across the country, and then I've got separate credentials for the province. Now, the important part of this is this. I've had people say, because now, electrical work is we can go to Revy or Rona or whatever is going on. Here's the reality of this. When I've had utilities say, we don't agree with you, and I said, here's what the utilities need to understand. The Government of Canada and Industry Canada trained and certified one profession for the utilization of all electricity, and that is electricians. So electrical engineers don't do this work. We install to those standards. We build to those standards. We do that work. Electrical engineers cannot put on tools. Now, and I also want to say I'm a building construction engineering technologist, which is construction from contracts to completion. And now the reason we do that is specific to energy, global warming. Buildings are designed for their environmental load, how much energy they use, with all the challenges going on with weather issues. We're working on global warming issues, but we're doing it in an unrealized way because other parts of our work allow a sight of the temperature they're trying to look at. Now, a third credential for me is this. I'm a thermal radiation consultant for 38 years. Now, when we say thermal radiation, people need to understand this. When you've heard about non-thermal effects or thermal effects, when they talk about, say, Wi-Fi, or they talk about EMF exposure or non-thermal effects, there are no such things as non-thermal effects. We are temperature specialists of 38 years. Temperature for us starts at minus 496 degrees Fahrenheit. So as soon as you get above 496 degrees Fahrenheit, which is absolute zero, you get a little bit of electron excitation. You get natural vibrations. And those natural vibrations and frequencies produce that heat. So it's so important for people to understand this when they talk about non-thermal not being understood or thermal not being understood. It's because the applications exceed their expertise, and here's why. Over 38 years, we have consulted for oil, gas, lumber, military, fire departments, trained fire departments, 25 years ago to see through the smoke. It's just seeing temperature beyond your visible spectrum is so important because even as an engineering professional, we design for temperatures and we calculate for it. We could not see temperature until you got that red, hot, glowing element. Now, and why this is important even for the audience here, I never expected to get into working for medical education, working in clinical environments on difficult diagnosis, but over a long period of time, medicine said, you know, you can see inflammation. I said it's elevated temperature, and I said, are you blind? And the bottom line is, with injury or infection, there's inflammation, and guess what? They're blind to it. They can't see it. So when you go see your doctor, he's looking at you and going, I can't really see what the heck is going on, and we're trying to diagnose you. So all we did with this was give medicine sight of their objectives. Now, the reason I say that as well is, when I say we're the most advanced infrared in the world, without exception, it doesn't matter military, whatever, it doesn't matter who the heck you are with this. Imagine this, in the year 2000, we started targeting health and cancer issues. Because I actually took it personally because my father passed away, you know, diabetes and leukemia, and I looked at that table full of pills and I said, what is that fixing? And he said, nothing. They're treating my symptoms. And I said, you've got to be kidding. And then when my father started falling over and, you know, you're getting to that end of your life, it was just horrifying, that helplessness that went with that. Because as electrical professionals, whether we're troubleshooting for industry, in big oil, big gas, all the above, we don't treat symptoms and we don't leave something behind. So it took 6 years before of challenges of all particular kind, taking challenges from medicine across the globe on, we can see inflammation, we can show you this, and taking on challenges. I actually lectured in 7 countries. And I think our biggest audience was about 2,000, but I would give a global challenge to medicine across the board. Bring it on. And so in 2006, I was asked to do our first submission for a CME program. Now, if your audience looks up continuing medical education, you'll see that medical professionals across the board require ongoing education credits as a requirement for ongoing medical licensing. The same thing with lawyers. Law evolves, so lawyers need ongoing education credits. So in 2006, that's when it started for me, and this is why I am a professor. I am an adjunct professor and a chief science officer, a group of 14,000 licensed health and consulting professionals that put on accredited medical education programs applicable in North America. So when I talk about to everybody here, it doesn't matter what state you live in, my medical credential extends to them. We train those doctors specific to all the issues I'm talking about. And again, for your audience, then we'll just get into taking questions from you or anything else. I'm a very humble professional with all of this, and you know, we don't want accolades for doing our jobs. Professionals are supposed to do your job. As a matter of fact, you have a duty to do your job.
That's right.
And so in leading our group, even to be cleared after 9/11 on an international technical issue, everybody missed, and it was about chemicals. And they said, we can't see the chemicals in the water. We can't see what's underneath the ground. I said, here's how you do this. So to get cleared to consult on that, to show them, here's this easy temperature application that just exceeded your expertise. So for people out there, and again, this is why this is so important, because, you know, part of this whistleblowing stuff is this. When we pass on to our government that education has evolved, medical education has changed, early detections of breast cancers can be seen. Early detections of any cancers can be seen. A brain injury can be seen. Concussions can be seen. And very humbling for me, because when I was cross-examined by utilities experts under oath, here are some of the questions they asked me to discredit me. They said, Curtis, are you a doctor? I said, no, but I lecture them for education credits they require for ongoing medical licensing. Curtis, do you consult in clinical environments? Yes. Curtis, are you a professional engineer? No, but we consult for all of them across the board. And it's just as simple as it is. My background is electrons, atoms, molecules, electrons, heat transfer at molecular levels. And so just these issues I'm talking about is this. When our government, even Canada, came to us and said, how did you see groundwater from the air? I said, you got a temperature differential. They said, we tried to see groundwater, which is considered nature's hidden treasure. And our job is to give that to biologists, to give that to hydrologists in forestry so they can protect it and all the above. But to give them sight of that lets them represent salmon spawning, those important waterways that are just incredible. And again, we built those standards so we could do what we do. And when we lead in any capacity whatsoever, listen, we don't sell out. It doesn't matter who somebody is or what they are. We're here to represent the people that can't talk for themselves. Even yesterday, someone said, you protected some animals. And I said, my job is all life, protecting all life, sustainability. And so I want you to ask me some very tough questions here, because we're in a lot of trouble, both in the United States and Canada. And I mean a lot of trouble, and it really is an unprecedented emergency of unprecedented across the board. And you don't hear people like me talking about that. But again, you can remember this. 25 years ago, when a municipality hired us and said, we need you to work with this fire department at the operations level and show them how you can see through the smoke.